Hello and welcome to the Andy and Friends podcast. I am your friend Andy, and in this episode, I talk with three different fellow content creators and DePIN influencers or experts or people who are DePIN enthusiasts. My friend William, who has been on countless DePIN spaces and is all over Twitter and other places talking about DePIN. Brad of DePIN Connection YouTube Channel, and Chris of the Chris Bagnell YouTube Channel. And in this episode, I talked to all three of them about what is the current state of DePIN and the market? What things we need to look for? What signals? What narratives? What tailwinds are we looking for? And does DePIN currently have going for it? What does the outlook for the rest of this year look like for DePIN? What about running DePIN devices versus doing something like Bitcoin mining? What are the pros and cons of doing either one? But also, what are some of their most under the radar, undervalued, or early stage DePINs that they think are worth looking into right now? What are some of their favorites, and what are some of those profitable right now? This is a great discussion all about all things DePIN. We really get into the weeds and details about the entire space. So if you have any interest in DePIN, which if you're in crypto, you should, then this is the episode for you. Let's jump into it. And here we are on the podcast with some pals here on my casting couch. Is that what this is?
Pretty much at this point, yeah.
So let's jump straight into the deep end. The deep end. What is the current state of DePIN?
I think, Chris, you want to go first? We'll work our way back around.
Yeah, so honestly, I think right now, obviously we're at the Bitcoin conference talking, but it seems to be that DePIN does not get the recognition that it will in the future. We actually are shooting some stuff right now, going around asking people about, do they know about DePIN? And I think maybe we got 1 out of 10 people that only knew helium. So it's not like a space that a lot of people know a lot about. And I think in the future, as with our channels, as we continue to make content, it will definitely grow. But right now it's it's like a niche. It's definitely a niche. It's a fun one though. So
why is it not? Why when you're walking around, people are like, what the hell is that? What's the deal?
I think the big issue is Bitcoin is obviously on the forefront of everything with all the legislature that's trying to get passed in DC, and a lot of people pretty much only focus on that. And if you go on X, people are only focusing really on the strategic asset reserve that they're trying to pass and all the possible assets that could be a part. So XRP, Solana, pretty much anything in the top 100 has a place at the table. Anything past that, a lot of people are just sketched out and they just say it's gambling. I feel like DePIN has the current state of DePIN is how Bitcoin was viewed 5-10 years ago, where people were like, oh, it's a scam, I don't really want to get into it. And I think as we continue to develop in this space, it's slowly going to get the recognition that Bitcoin has.
Brad, what about you?
I think we're still very early. Fortune came out with an article a couple weeks ago talking about DePIN. And one of the things they said about crypto in general is that there's a perception problem. And I would agree with that. I think there is a perception problem. I think that a lot of people still don't take the space seriously when you have the meme coin stuff going on. And frankly, I think with crypto in general, there's always been this problem of, where's the revenue coming from and where's the value add? There's been a lot of speculative buying and valuations. I think DePIN has the opportunity to finally drive real revenue and bring real world value and actually bring usage to some of these L1s outside of just speculative, crypto people buying these tokens. But I still think we're very early in this. You heard Ariel on stage a couple weeks ago talking about how they're getting interest from Web 2 venture capitalists. And I think that's where, DePIN is going to go next. I think it can bring in the next wave of investors, but I think more people just need to know about it. And as Web 2 companies start to see the opportunity to bring down their CapEx and scale in a way they haven't been able to in the past, I think DePIN is going to do quite well.
In crypto, when you mention VCs, that's kind of a naughty word. Is Web 2, VCs coming in? Is that good? Is that bad?
It's a good question. There's been a lot of talk right now about centralization in general within crypto. I think right now, maybe the VCs, yes, it is a little bit of a dirty word when it comes to crypto, and we've seen the negative side of that in the past. But I think as far as bringing Web 2 capital into the space, I think it's going to be necessary. You look at, how much money is in Web 3, it's very minute compared to what's available in Web 2. And I think anything we can do to kind of create that bridge to make it easier to bring more capital into the space is a good thing overall.
I like that.
Yeah, I guess I'll add on to that. To your VC comment, I think that it's inevitable that they're going to show up. Like they have to come at some point for us to be even taken remotely seriously. And just kind of some anecdotal stuff. I was in New York a couple weeks ago for the bell opening ceremony for Hashdex. So they're like one of the first like crypto ETFs that I think they IPO'd like back in February, if I'm not mistaken. But I got invited to that. It was awesome. Thank you so much, Wolf Financial. Freaking great. A little shout out there. But I talked to a lot of Morgan Stanley advisors and just like, traditional finance guys. They know nothing about DePIN. And when you explain the idea to them, like a little light bulb goes off and they're like, that's a genius idea. Oh my God. Like, why haven't we heard about that? And I think it's because we have like Chris said, we have this kind of mix up of like, we're in this bucket of altcoins and like meme coins and kind of crypto. Crypto itself is this giant like bubble word that DePIN is a part of, where I think a future where DePIN succeeds is where DePIN is a separate bubble to where crypto is. So we're not like necessarily associated with crypto as much. We're our own thing now. We're a distributed business model, essentially, is what I've been calling it, like the new democratized business model.
Okay, that's interesting. So what has to happen from where we are now, as Brad has put, very early stage, which I would agree, to get to where DePIN is its own industry and not able to be, capitalizing just a few $1 billion like we currently are?
I honestly, I think it's just time, Mark. We just need to mature. We need the builders to keep building. We need all of us, over here, we're all content creators, to keep creating content, educating people about this stuff, and just slowly growing. Because I think it's very similar to what the internet was. It's the same kind of idea of, hey, this is a brand new thing that a lot of people still don't quite understand. But if you have people who are pushing their DePIN deployment businesses, you have like Tyler, you have Brad here with Helium Hotspot and Hive Mapper deployment businesses. I think doing that like pushes all of this forward in a meaningful way. So we just need to keep doing that.
Okay, so make more content. I accept you want conditions done.
Perfect. We love your content.
Will do. Okay, so you have a deployment business?
I do.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I got into the space with Helium, like a lot of us, and started off, ordered a few hotspots, set them up with myself, friends, and family, and then started getting referrals, and started working the referral route, and ended up building out about 70 rooftop installs with Helium, and like looking at topography maps and making sure I had them in like high elevation.
When is this time wise?
That was it must have been back in 2021.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
Making some good money with 70 hotspots.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
He's just showing off now.
Although, some of my orders did get burned with like the whole Never situation. So you had to roll with the punches a little bit through that time period as well. But then, I realized, okay, I think DePIN is going to be a major thing moving forward. So I started looking for other opportunities in the space. I came across Hive Mapper, and I got my pre-orders in the first day that they opened, and started thinking about, okay, who's the optimal participant for this type of project. That's how I, kind of wrap my head around with these different projects, how I can potentially build out a deployment business. And Uber and Lyft drivers came to mind. So I started just pitching my Uber and Lyft drivers every time I was in one, whether I was traveling for work, and I live in Chicago. So that's a high value region. At the time, we didn't really know because we didn't get our cameras until 8 months later. Right. But I already had, 20, 30 drivers lined up at that point. So yeah, it was great. I ended up growing that to about 100 drivers across North America, some in South America, and then came across Demo. And I was like, well, I already have, Helium hosts. I have drivers with my Hive Mapper fleet, so why not double down? And I grew that out to about 250 vehicles in my Demo fleet. Then I have like WeatherXM deployments. And so it was a lot of fun building them out. And I was actually visiting Ariel out in San Francisco, and we were talking about how I was building out my fleet, and came to realize that what I was doing was more effective than what other people were doing that were trying to build out fleets. And that's why I decided to actually launch my channel, is to come up with tutorials and basically help people enter the space.
And I want to add on to that. Sorry, Andy, I do want to add on to that, but I want to basically shout out that like I think that is the future right there, where DePIN spreads out because of businesses like Brad's, and I just started my DePIN deployment business. It's very small, but I think that getting individuals to do a DePIN properly is like it's going to be harder to do that than where you have Brad here, who knows how to do the best installs, who knows like the best places to put these devices, and he goes out there and installs 80, 100, 1,000, as opposed to going to each individual person saying you should buy a hotspot. So I think that is the future, where we start like going parabolic, where you have more of these businesses popping up.
The name you mentioned twice now, the Arleo. What is this?
Ariel, the CEO of HiveMapper.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Hey, Ariel.
So, Chris, I want to get you in just 1 second with this next question, but before, so I'll talk about this deployment thing. If somebody's watching this and they have a HiveMapper, they have a demo, they have a whatever, one device, they don't have anything beyond that. Is this whole like deployment business thing pretty accessible for just the normal person? What do they need? What do they need in their repertoire of skills to go out and like do this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I presented on this. I actually put together like a slide deck just on this subject.
Okay, cool.
For like Hotspotty had a conference like a year and a half ago, virtual conference. So
Is that publicly available?
It should be.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Well, maybe I can link that. That'd be cool.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, so I have it broken into 4 different categories. Okay, if you want to participate within DePIN. So one I call the hobbyist. So that would be you want to put them on your own roof. You want to put them install units in your own car. Then I have small scale deployer, which is basically just reaching out to your friends and family. Right? We people that you talk to in your day-to-day, activities, and just, deploy with them. And that's anyone can really do that. Once you start getting to large scale deployment, it's a little bit more time intensive. I have LLC set up for each one because there's, tax benefits to expensing certain things. And it takes up a lot more time. It was a bit of a grind. It can certainly pay off very well, but for me, I was working a full-time job at the time, and it was basically like having a second full-time job on top of it. I loved it, but you can get burnt out on that for sure. And then the fourth category is just being an investor in the space, because there are a lot of these projects that are very early stages where just investing in the token alone can pay off very well too. And that's kind of a more hands-off approach if you don't want to be a deployer.
Yeah, very cool. I love that. So getting back to the broader picture of DePIN, and I'll start with you on this one, Chris. Okay, we talked about kind of where we're at now. When you look at crypto in general, there's meme coins and NFTs and scam coins and rug pulls and stuff. There's just a lot of just garbage and shit out there, right? Just thousands and thousands of tokens. And so in the microcosm, the niche of just DePIN, I want to kind of ask the group here, where you like, what's your rank the health of DePIN? There's going to be vaporware. There's going to be scams. There's just going to be early stage stuff that doesn't have revenue yet. Maybe there's even early stage stuff that, we're honest, we don't really even see the path to revenue. And there are some, that have real revenue. So what is if you're taking the temperature of the entire industry of DePIN, what's your assessment of the health?
Should I do like a fear and greed index kind of thing? I think we're at like 60%. There's definitely projects, and I don't want to name any of them because I don't want to. No, I don't want to talk bad on
just kidding.
But there's projects that we were just talking before that aim to be DePIN projects, and it's like, what is the actual point of this? Like, this doesn't solve anything. Like, it's a decentralized, for anyone that doesn't know what DePIN is, decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Like, these are networks that provide some sort of improvement in our everyday life, but they use blockchain technology to accomplish that. And it allows it to be decentralized because you can give them to anybody in the world. Now, when you're selling stuff that can't really be mass deployed, like, for instance, a watch or a toothbrush or anything like that, where it's like you can really only do one per person, and it's like, what kind of data does it actually generate that will be actually useful to us? So I think as DePIN is continuing to develop, I mean, HiveMapper was obviously like the godfather. They kind of pioneered all this stuff, and they made mistakes along the way, but they're kind of paving the path for what the future is to hold. And I think, even I've been in this space with the DePIN in particular since 2021 as well. And I've seen so many projects come and go, but I've seen the steady and slow progress, which is what we need. And it's just going to take time to actually get to the promised lands pretty much.
I want to go to the promised
Yeah.
land.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
And when you talk about, OG projects, and we've already mentioned Helium, that's a great example of one that they had an idea, didn't exactly pan out. They pivoted big time, and now it seems like that there's real revenue, real users and stuff like that coming. So it also seems like maybe they need to take a look at the playbooks of normal Silicon Valley startups and or Ross from Friends and pivot and be willing to just change it and I guess deal with the hate and the pushback that comes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a ton of projects that are kind of doing they'd have the same exact model, like 2 projects almost identical. And it's not a bad thing. Like competitors are good, but as being in the crypto space, it's difficult because if you want to push one or the other, it's like at that point you have to look at the actual people behind the project and what they stand for and see if they're just in it for the money or if they're actually in it for the long haul. Demo is a great example of that. Didn't they just push off their token unlock?
They did.
Yeah. So
They-
do you want to...
Thank you, Dr. Brad. I mean, Dr. Chris. Now, Dr. Brad. What's the health
I
check?
concur.
The health tech. But to answer your question, yes, Demo did extend out their unlock period for their team and investors, which is something you don't generally see with projects. So I think that goes a long way. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Demo team. Yeah, it's a great question, though. So anytime you see a sector like DePIN that's going to explode, we saw this in the last market cycle, right, where every project started just like attaching NFTs to their project, right? I think you're going to have a lot of projects that come in that are vaporware, right? That wanted to just ride the high of the, DePIN narrative, if you will. So I think there's a lot of great projects being built, but I think it's really, really important more than ever to really look at the fundamentals of the project. And I break that down. So I do a lot of deep dives on my channel. I break it down to 4 categories. You mentioned a couple of the things. So number 1 is path to revenue. So what's the total addressable market? And then what's the differentiator? Like, how are you going to grab market share? And that's the number 1 thing I look at with any of these projects, because in order for them to succeed, they have to eventually drive revenue. You have to have that flywheel effect kick in, which we're kind of still waiting for, but I think we're on the precipice of it happening with some of these projects. Number 2 is the path of participation, right? And I think it's very project dependent. You look at a project like GeoNet. Yeah, it maybe the barrier to entry is a little bit higher, but they have 17,000 miners. I think once they get to 20,000, they can basically address 80% of the total addressable market. That's very different than Demo, who's trying to get 1 million cars connected. So I think that price sensitivity is dependent on how many participants you need to move the needle. So you need to have the differentiator, path to revenue, the path to enough participation to move the needle. Number 3 is the team. And I think that's as important as anything. And I look at the LinkedIn, I look at the full history of all of the people working on the project, because, you can have the potential path to revenue, the path to participation, but if you don't have the team working behind the scenes to pull it together, you're dead in the water. And I think we've seen that with certain teams that maybe there are some red flags, let's say, and those projects tend to fail. Right. So that's extremely important. And the last thing is the tokenomics. And the main thing I look for there is just making sure it's fair distribution of tokens. And there's certain red flags to look for, like if their token unlocks all happen like right when the height of the bull market should be taking place. And in fact, that's one of the things I would like to see with certain projects is have the token unlock schedule drawn out a little bit further to show the commitment. It's one thing to say you're committed as a team. It's a whole another thing to like put your money where your mouth is and actually extend those token unlocks out.
Yeah. You mentioned GeoNet, which is definitely a favorite of mine. And I think that's a great example of not vaporware, real revenue. Is it multiple millions per year now? It's well over well over a million
I think
per year. But the Web2 equivalent had 10,000 sensors worldwide after 10, 20 years of building. And here comes GeoNet with the DePIN model. And 2 years later now, or 3 years later, it's 17,000 stations around the world with real revenue. Love Mike over there at GeoNet. So that was Dr. Brad's health check. Dr. William, do you
I
concur?
consider myself more of a nurse at this point, or a registered nurse, but compared to Brad at least. But no, I definitely have to echo their sentiment, and I definitely concur with everything they said. Regarding the temperature of the market, I definitely think we are in the like lukewarm phase.
Mm.
Just because obviously like we're all anticipating the bull market to show up at some point any day now, I'm hoping. So that's definitely going to be a factor. But one thing I'm noticing is that there's more revenue piling on. There's more nodes hopping online. You have projects like Helium that have iterated time and time again and have just recovered so well in terms of their business model. And I think that's like the one thing that needed to happen was you needed a lot of DePINs to fail in the early days, find out what didn't work, and then find the teams and the projects that really came back and said, "Wait a minute, let's try this way and see if this works." And everything clicked together. And one of those teams, I'm not saying they failed or anything back in the day, but one of those teams that learned from all those failures, I think, was DABA Network. You know, they're like the model that they're going after, I think, is like going to be the model, the DePIN model, where you have managed deployments, you have a software dashboard you can manage everything from. You have teams out there that are taking a piece of the revenue, sure, but they're out there installing these units where they need to be, where they like they get the most use out of. And so I just think that is the most key thing. A key factor is the business model, finding the right business model where you have real demand, real revenue. And I think Chris wants to say something here.
Interesting you mentioned DABA and the way that they're actually doing things, because it kind of lit off a light bulb in my head. It's kind of similar to hosting an ASIC, no? I mean, you don't really do anything. You just pay the monthly costs and they handle everything for you. And I think, I mean, it's proven there's so many hosting companies here at the Bitcoin conference that are trying to get people in the door, and it's a working model. So
yeah, and that's where you'll see DePIN deployment businesses really pop off. Like you'll see businesses like Brad's and like Tyler's, and hopefully like mine one day. Let's hope. But basically, you'll have like our businesses start maybe offering a software dashboard similar to what DABA does, and we have a list of DePINs you can purchase on our behalf. We take a split of the revenue or something. We install it in a business for you. We do all the sales, all the talking, and all you have to do is give us the money.
Yeah, I love that DABA started offering WeatherXM and do deployments to that.
Oh yeah.
So okay, I'm glad you brought DABA up. Huge fan of them. Shout out DABA Network. Big fans of DABA. Waiting to deal with figuring out all my 50 hot spots of figuring out who's my boots on the ground.
Your LCO,
my LCOs and stuff. But on the other side of that, which I think it is a fantastic model, I'm very excited to see the future of it. You could argue that the downside to that model is scale, and could maybe the deployment model as well. What if what I think was going to happen with DePIN, it's going to be the future of the way businesses are built. What if that actually happens? It comes true. And business after business is like, we're going to build our business with the DePIN model. It seems to work. That catches wildfire. Can DABA Network, with them doing a kind of a centralized deployment, they hire their people to deploy and then working with, LCOs and stuff and kind of have the branches of the tree, or, with, doing a deployment business, whoever you can hire, contract out to do this. Can you scale? Can you keep up? Is that a downside?
I think we're going to see a hybrid approach. I think DABA is being very innovative in what they're doing. Like to your point, WeatherXM is doing the targeted rollouts, but Helium's doing something with their grant program right now, right? Where it's kind of a hybrid approach where, the whole goal, I guess one of the major benefits, aside from having, more professional install done, is that you can match supply and demand better. And that's where, DABA's taking over and only installing where they have demand. Helium's, hybrid approach with the grant program is, you have to submit and you have to, show where you're going to install them, so they can also make sure that there is going to be demand in those spots and they're in their, high traffic areas. So I think we could see a hybrid approach where, maybe, you have DABA where if you so choose, you can invest and they'll do the install for you. But also, for people that want to get out there and, get boots on the ground and take over and get the full, token reward. So that's obviously a benefit to doing it yourself. But I think if you have both options available, I think that would be pretty beneficial and address that scalability issue that you're talking about.
To whoever wants to take it, earlier in your previous answer, Brad, talking about kind of what you're looking at to discern when looking at projects between what's vaporware, what's real, how you can find some quality amongst most of the chaff, which is the majority of crypto, if we're being honest. What are red flags that you would see in a project or the team? Or what are things that you look at as high signal in a very noisy environment that says, this is legit, this is worth my time and attention? What do you look for?
When I see the words, what is it, decentralized DePIN technology, that's a red flag to me. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Well, that's a redundant phrase. But no, Chris, go ahead. I
was
just want
going
to
to say, if you post a video about it, it's usually the financial advice I take. And I just... No, but,
I don't like that.
I like looking. I like looking at projects and looking at where the team is actually from. And usually a lot of these DePINs have very intelligent people that have very high degrees, and they worked at usually a Silicon Valley company. And then they discovered this whole DePIN sector, and we're starting to see a lot of Silicon Valley kind of shifting over to DePIN. I think all that money is slowly going to go over. I mean, I could probably go on about how many different flags there could be. It really does depend on the project and what they're trying to offer. There was another project I will not name, but they pretty much aim to be about 7 things in one. And at what point is it too much? That's kind of where you have to figure it out. Like Helium had a good model. Definitely people were pissed off when they decided to switch and split their token. But they had it separated with IoT and mobile, and then the H&T token. And they kind of separated it into 3 different entities. But if they were to have it all combined, like let's say they had a device that did LoRaWAN, the 5G cell, and then it's also like a Wi-Fi router, and just it could measure the power in your house. Like it's just stuff that doesn't need to be combined, and that's definitely a red flag for me.
There's something something to be said about focus, not just with like where you're taking the company, whatever, but just also the data set that you're accumulating. Because how much more difficult is it to have your sales team contacting the litany of companies they're reaching out to sell this data to not be selling one type of data, but to be selling like 6 different types, like 6 different types of companies, and being an expert in each one of those. So yeah, focus. I like that. Any other thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I can go, I guess. Yeah, I would definitely echo what Chris said. Looking at the team is definitely a key factor. Brad mentioned it before, but total addressable market, that's huge. Like figure out, is there any value in this data or service that's being provided? And then 2, what is their implementation like? Are they using, smartphones to collect data or provide service? Is that app like useful? Test it out yourself, figure it out. I would do all of those things. But yeah, looking at the team is definitely one of the primary factors, as well as tokenomics too. I would say tokenomics are probably one of the key kind of foreboding factors where you're like, wait a minute, 80% of the supply is going to the team and the investors. Maybe that's not good.
I agree. I think the team there needs to be a focus and a lot of talk around the revenue generation. I think we've seen a lot of projects that are more, I guess, focused on selling hardware.
Yeah.
And really the hardware, in my opinion, they should be looking as they scale to push the price down of the hardware. That shouldn't be their profit center. And I think projects like Demo that are effectively pushing down the cost to grow the network, I think that's a huge green flag. But when you see, to your point, when if you're selling sensors for all these different things, there's no talk about revenue and there's just talk about selling hardware. That's a huge red flag. I mean, I've worked in startups where you spread yourself out too thin, you can be average in a lot of different places. But I think you're a lot better off focusing on, one vertical and being really good at it, especially in DePIN right now, where we're still kind of paving the way and trying to get Web 2 in and improve out the space. I think especially in these early stages is absolutely critical. Another thing I see sometimes is projects that are delaying their token launch for market conditions. Okay. To me, that's kind of a red flag, because if you're super focused on your token launch in the short term, how committed are you to the project? Like, I think your fundamentals of your project should take over regardless of, market conditions in the long term. So that's, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, that's a really interesting thing you just said, because, I can definitely see that perspective. In the past, I've honestly seen that as a good thing. Like, crypto's so fickle, it's so small. Especially retail investors don't know what they're doing, and they're in and out of things just on the simplest terms
on one TikTok video.
Yeah, on one TikTok video, and it's a really careful and thin line you have to like balance on. And so I'm like, well, obviously you want the best conditions possible to launch your token, but conversely, I see the other side now that you kind of mentioned that. It's like, so how do you, when could be a good situation where it's good that they're paying attention to that, and then how do you know if they're spending too much time or it's too much of a focus and there's too much of concern there?
On the token launch?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've seen projects that continue to delay their token launch, and you can listen to their spaces, and there are hints that you can kind of listen through to that they're delaying things on purpose, right? I think we've seen that. And what's interesting is I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and they take the other side of the argument, that hey, it's really critical to have a really successful token launch. But to me, I think we need to get to this place where we're no longer looking at these projects as a 2 to 3 year, get rich quick. I think we need to, for the health of the industry, we need to see more longevity with these projects, and we need to get to a point where the token emissions can be matched by the revenue and the token burns, and you have the flywheel effect come into play. Because we've seen now, yes, incentivizing through token, you can get participation. That's been proven out time and time again. What we haven't seen yet is whether the revenue can actually make the project sustainable. And I think that's what we still need to see here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that while tokenomics do matter and like token incentives obviously matter, I think your main focus should be building out the network primarily. And obviously, if you don't have a token out, it's much harder to do that. But we see projects have successfully done that before. We're seeing that with DePIN Network. They don't have a token out yet, and they're building out a very successful network right now. And so I just feel like that is a key indicator of a team that takes their job very seriously. And they say, hey, token, they understand the token matters. They understand tokenomics matter. They understand the incentives matter. But it's all about, hey, let's get our network out there. Let's get the demand met, because there's a demand for this service that we can provide at a much cheaper cost, in a more efficient manner. And so I feel like when you have a team like that focused on that sole purpose, and they say, hey, our token's coming out whenever, soon, let's hope. But yeah, look, we want to get back to business. We want to get back to, brass tacks, and like talk about getting more hotspots out there in the hands of people who are going to put them in places that need to be there.
Which might be an example of a good way to approach this problem, a balanced approach. Daba, they have effectively kind of delayed their token launch, but they've never put like hard dates and said, okay, it's happening here, and then changed it all of a sudden. It's been with conditions, but clearly, like, regardless of that, if you look at what the team is doing, they're building a network. It's happening, and you can see it happen. So maybe that's, like most things, the answer isn't either extreme. It's somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and I think if you read between the lines with them, I think they are looking to get centralized exchange listings for their token launch more so than waiting for improving market conditions. A couple other, like, one of the major red flags that I think we need to start really paying attention to is how passive is it for participation? Because you look at, like, Helium made it through, the IoT network. There's a lot of miners went offline, but they made it through the bear market because people forgot they had them plugged in. They stopped paying attention, but they were still up and running. And I think that's something like Hivemapper has made a concerted effort to, with the B, to make it passive. And I think that is going to be really, really important, because through bear markets, you're not always going to have earnings that can keep people engaged. So that's one of the things I'm looking at with some of these projects, where it requires the participant to constantly have to set up their phone with this every single day. And I think it's going to be really hard for those projects to succeed when market conditions are poor.
Yeah. And market conditions aside, if you want the every person, you truly want this to be decentralized and truly spread out, well, you got to move past us, the crypto nerds. You got to get to like normal people, and normal people are not going to deal with like Hivemapper, the first generation. Normal people are not going to deal with that thing. They need something you plug in and it works. So that iteration, which a lot of these projects we're talking about are doing that, which is great.
There's one on your hat, right? There's plug and play, right? Plug and play.
Which is, literally plug the thing in. It's pretty awesome. Plug it in.
Heck yeah.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I just thought of 2 more red flags, and this is crazy if you're still doing this in 2025. You sell a device that has micro USB. What are you doing?
Wait, those still exist?
Yes, I got sent, well, it was a hardware wallet, but I got sent it in 2025, and it was micro USB. You cannot sell devices with outdated technology.
Did you like send a picture of you using your USB-C and you're just like, it's not working?
But you can't do that in 2025. It's like crypto is advanced technology, and you're using stuff that's been around for, I don't know how long, 2004 it came out, something ridiculous. But the other issue is you look at a project and they claim that they make an announcement with a major Fortune 500 company, and it's not real. So that is something that I've seen with multiple projects, actually, with NASA, with the 2020 Olympic Games, with AT&T, NVIDIA. They make these bold announcements that they're partnered with these projects, and a lot of people don't do the research. They see that surface article and they're like, good enough for me. I'm going to buy 100 of these devices, and they end up getting burned. So that's more so of a individual due diligence. You have to really be alert, and that's the crypto space in general. Like us, I don't think a lot of us really cover meme coins. I mean, I've made like a live stream trading meme coins, but like we actually cover projects with real world use case and that offer something to improve our everyday lives. And when you see that, it takes away from the whole.
Yeah. So any crypto projects who are watching this, don't lie.
Yeah, lying's not cool, guys. Lying's not cool.
Thanks for coming to our TED Talk. One quick derailment here I want to take when we're talking about token launches and stuff. Just on the topic of tokens in general, how do you think about the requirement, of a token? Like everything on this planet that is a business or whatever, or a product or an idea, doesn't need a token. But there's some advantages, if you go that route. How do you determine if a token is actually necessary, or if it's just something they added on because that's what you do in this space?
That's something I'm still figuring out for sure. I've had this talk a lot, especially recently, about do you need a token? Especially with the prevalence of stablecoins becoming. I mean, obviously we have the stablecoin, Genius Act hopefully passing soon. I think that's going to be major for the whole space. But do you need a token to come through? Do you need revenue to flow into the token, and then that token be paid out to your network nodes? I believe there should be options. I believe it should be an optionality thing. I think Havelo did this. I don't know if you know Havelo.
Heard of
yeah. They I spoke with Dominic.
Another extension.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, basically, it's a software that you download that automatically scans your computer, and it assigns different DePINs. Like it has built-in like a multi-DePIN functionality where it says, "Oh, well, we think your GPU would be perfect for Koi network or something like that." And it automatically starts doing that for you. So you're mining multiple DePINs on one software platform. But they give you the option to get paid in fiat if you want. And all they do is take a cut of that. And so they give you Tether if you want Tether, or they give you the tokens if you want the tokens. And so I think that should be a key factor in a lot of DePINs, just again, making, to Brad's point, making it as passive as possible. So I can just click a button and say, yeah, I want a USDT or USDC instead of your token, because I think the token's still integral. I think if you're trying to decentralize decision-making, of course, you need some form of like governance metric or something like that. And I'm not even going to get into DAOs, of course, but I think that is important. But again, I think the optionality should be there for your community.
Yeah, that's fair. I do like the tokens, but I think it has to have some sort of tie to the revenue. I don't think that just having a governance token to me is enough. And I know there's different sentiment around this, but one of the things I thought was really interesting that's come up on one of your spaces recently is around token burns. And this came up from somebody coming over from Web 2, and their whole like thought process behind this was, in the Web 2 space, you don't do stock buybacks in the early stages. You want to reinvest as much as possible for hyper growth early on. And they think it's a flawed model to have token burns so early in projects. And they think that all of that revenue should be reinvested in the growth of the project. I thought that was interesting. I don't know what you guys think about that, but
I think a portion makes sense, but like, again, if you don't have any revenue coming to the token, then how are you paying your node operators, right? How does it benefit them? It's not. You have a bunch of inflationary pressure on the token then, devalues, of course, and then you have everyone just unplug their nodes and say, see you later.
On one hand, I love the idea, and in theory, I think it is helpful to have token burns. Conversely, I do question whether it actually has the effect that we all subscribe to. You burn, there's less, more, the ones that remain are more valuable. Is that true? I don't know. Is there any true examples that we've seen in the history of crypto so far where the burning of tokens has actually shown a value increase of the remaining supply? Or is it purely sentiment? Is it purely something that, it makes the community feel better? It makes potential investors feel better. The idea of it, the optics of it is great, but materially it doesn't have much effect. Anybody, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you might be able to compare it to like Bitcoin and, well, not Ethereum anymore, but being able to actually, yeah, they really screwed
Rest
that.
in peace.
Yeah, but used to make $30 a day on one GPU, and now it's like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, Bitcoin.
We're not bitter.
The good old days.
Bitcoin.
Back in my day, we used to make $30 on
We used to pedal a bicycle, mine Bitcoin.
So Bitcoin with their block reward and having their halvings every 4 years, that's their it's a deflationary measure. Am I saying the right words there? But I think for a lot of these projects that are on chain, like most of these DePIN projects are on Solana, Polygon, they're not mineable in the sense that they have this halving. Like not all of them do. So I'm thinking maybe they are kind of substituting with this token burn as a way to make it seem familiar to most people. They're like, okay, there is still that familiarity where there is going to be less tokens over time. Now, obviously, Bitcoin, there is not less tokens over time, but there's less tokens that are released over time. So it's kind of on the same metric, I would say. But yeah, do you guys have any?
I would say that it's more of like a when you think of like token burns, I think of it more as a in a TradFi sense, a bid, like almost like a permanent bid is there, where like if you have enough revenue flowing in, the bid gets higher, the floor gets higher. And so, I mean, obviously it's not perfect. We've seen, tokens fluctuate in price, but I think that's just because they're not generating as much revenue as they, could. So like, in Helium's case, if they get more and more revenue, it could stand to reason that the bid will getting, higher, and you'll have a higher token price essentially, or floor price.
Yeah. I think to your point right now, it's in the early stages is an optics thing. I mean, you look at GeoNet, right? I think 1.4% of their total supply is burned out of the supply forever. But for me, the main thing though around it is the transparency. And that's one of the beautiful things about having tokens and using blockchain is that there should be transparency. And there's certain projects I've called out recently and demanding more transparency. I don't think there's any reason for you not to have transparency. And in fact, it almost appears like you're hiding something if you don't, in my opinion. But I think the long tail impact could be, I think it could have an impact on price. If you start seeing a meaningful percentage of the token burn out of supply forever, down the road, I think it could. But for now, I think it is just an optics thing, and it sounds cool, and it looks good that, hey, we're bringing down the total supply, but I don't think we've seen it in a meaningful enough way at this point.
Yeah, and we just mentioned mining and Ethereum mining and Bitcoin mining, and I think there's some interesting comparisons to compare between crypto mining, altcoin mining, or Bitcoin mining, specifically like having high-powered, high-energy ASICs, or if you're still running, GPUs. If you're profitable on GPUs, I want to know what you're doing.
Hey, don't talk about my heater like that, all right? It's my home heater.
Exactly. Comparing a single, Bitcoin miner that burns 3,200 to 3,500 watts, constantly, versus the huge number of DePIN devices that just sip the watts, 1 to 10 watts, maybe, So how, whoever wants to take this, how do you think about that comparison? How do you think most people, is that the big advantage of DePIN? Is that for bringing new people on board? Like, Talk to me about this.
Yeah, I think definitely I have an advantage. I don't want to be ageist or anything, but because I'm like so young, I kind of.
What do you think? You're young? Wait, the gap is not that big.
There's pros and cons.
It's not that big, right?
It's pretty massive, actually.
There's
right?
Yeah.
He's 14. Everyone, he's 14.
There's pros and cons to this, obviously, being that I'm younger than like the traditional person in this space. The biggest con being that I don't have the capital to invest in machines like ASICs. So when I saw the whole concept of DePIN, it really I got excited about it because I saw an avenue that I could not only create videos on and share with people, but also talk to people my age that I don't know and kind of have this familiarity because the people, I mean, if you look at the credit card debt in this country right now, like we're at all times high with debt, inflation, like everything is not good and people want to find ways to make money. And when you tell them that here's an ASIC that's $12,000 that makes, you know, anywhere from $200 to $1,200 a month, depending on market conditions, they're a lot less enthusiastic to actually jump in versus if I say, okay, here's a $99 demo device. It's kind of speculative right now, but it has very good potential and the team is great and it's plug and play. You don't have to worry about it versus an ASIC. There is a lot of maintenance you have to deal with. Like I host right now with Terra Hosting, shout out to Terra Hosting, but I used to have my device in my basement and the constant hiccups that I had to deal with because I wasn't home. If the device goes down, it's down until I go home. And the amount of electricity that it actually runs, and especially with COVID and everything that happened, we saw electricity prices skyrocket. So the idea behind DePIN and these low powered miners, I think like it actually shocks me that there are so many people that don't know what it is because it generates so much for such a lower price point and like anybody can get in like $100 now you can buy an Xbox or you could buy a crypto miner. It's like Xbox game. Yeah, you can't buy an
I was like, what Xboxes are you buying, dude? I was about to say
on eBay, yeah. But it's definitely the lower price of entry is a huge selling point that I try to push more than anything else because that's I mean money is everything.
Yeah, I think the electricity is certainly a big consideration, a powerful consideration. But I think you're right. I think the cost of entry is the biggest because it's very non-palatable for a normal person who's not a crypto native or whatever you're going to call us, crypto nerd, to spend $5 to $10 grand with the potential of losing $5 to $10 grand on a machine that could be a doorstop versus by buying one that's between 99 to $400 or $500. You know, for a lot of people who are willing to lose a little bit of money experimenting in space, that's far less of a big deal to a factor of 10.
You need to take the ROI into consideration too. Like especially with helium, if I buy an indoor hotspot from Helium, it's $250 right now. If I put that in a semi-successful commercial business, like in a restaurant that's like it's kind of busy, I can ROI on that miner in 1 month. And that's nice. That's really nice. And it'll just continue to passively earn me, you know, $200, $300 a month because, again, it's providing a real service. It's not sucking up a lot of electricity, like you said. And it's funny, I mentioned that, I'm just a little side tangent, but the restaurant I'm referring to in my portfolio, his main concern was like, oh, crypto mining, I've heard about that. Like, is this going to suck up a lot of energy? And I was like, well, no, that's the beautiful thing is this is literally powered through your Ethernet cable with this PoE injector. Doesn't consume much electricity at all. And it's going to generate really good revenue. And he's like, heck yeah, sign me up. You know,
is that a real current ROI on a helium?
Oh yeah, that's easily. If you're in a decent restaurant, like I mean that sushi place like probably gets like super packed Friday through Sunday, and like I would say generating on average like Monday through Friday maybe like $3 to $4 a day.
That's crazy. That's awesome. Brad, thoughts here?
Yeah, I think from one end, I think looking forward, the environmentally minded people, and this came up in the last market cycle, right? Like, how environmentally friendly is Bitcoin mining? You know, I think this is going to be something that comes up again, and I think it works in DePIN's advantage, right? Especially as DePIN starts to be in the news, that's one of the strategic advantages we can talk to. But to your point, yeah, I mean, if you have a fixed cost to run your miner that's ongoing, people are at a certain point unplug, right? If it's not penciling out. Whereas I think with DePIN, you have upfront costs generally, very negligible, if at all. You have ongoing costs. And I think that helps to kind of limit any fall off for participation. And I think a lot of these projects, you need to have stable participation to have successful projects. So I think it definitely works in the favor of DePIN.
Like has already been discussed, people have run helium hotspots and forgot
Yeah.
they were running them.
Yeah.
Because you plug in an ASIC miner at your house, you will watch your electricity bill probably double.
Sure.
Maybe,
That's scary.
Yeah. Whereas you can probably plug in 5 or 10 DePIN devices in your house, and you might not ever notice that the electricity costs change.
But your wife does. Your wife will notice all the time, and she will be like, what's that thing you just bought? Oh my God, what else are you putting up here? And there's just wires everywhere. And she's like, you need to clean this up.
Is this a general observation?
Yeah, no, this
Or
is a general
personal?
observation. I'm not flashing back
Sounded
right
like-
now. I promise I'm not flashing back.
Sounded very specific.
I love you, honey.
Okay, so talking about where where DePIN is, and some of these main advantages. I'm curious, what are some other things that y'all are seeing right now that you think are some of the most important things or the most critical things? Maybe it's at this stage of the cycle. Maybe it's just at this stage of DePIN in general, like its growth curve, that are happening in DePIN right now.
Revenue, right? It's just something that was missing in the last market cycle.
So much.
Crazy.
Crazy.
It was like the speculative valuations. I mean, helium was a great example. They got destroyed in that Forbes article. And frankly, I wouldn't say rightfully so, but it was certainly overvalued. Okay, let's be real.
I think a fair amount of it was pretty fair.
Yeah.
But they did the right things and they went the right
They
direction.
learned. They
Yes.
recovered. They
They
learned.
They did. And in fairness to helium, I mean, they were a pioneer in the space. There's
Sure.
like, we wouldn't have all these DePIN projects if it weren't for helium.
That's also true.
And when you look at like infrastructure like that, it's a 2 market cycle play, in my opinion, because first you have to build out the infrastructure, and then you have to have usage on your infrastructure. And in helium's case, like, manufacturers had to build devices that could connect to their network. So, it's not like the sensor categories where Demo, Hive Mapper, they can turn on revenue pretty quickly, because they're just monetizing data. So I think it's just a little bit different. Now, Deep, on the other hand, they had nerd nodes. They already had workloads to move over to their network. So they've strategically positioned themselves a little bit different. But I think revenue is the big thing, and what we need to continue seeing in the space.
And before I get any other thoughts, what you just said is interesting. I am wearing the Deep hat. I'm not just trying to like shield Deep or anything. You can't actually buy any devices right now, so good luck trying to listen.
Thanks,
to me
mate.
about that, which I think is a good thing right now. But that is a different model. They had an existing business. It was a crypto business, but primarily hosting crypto nodes and stuff. Existing business with existing revenue, and they've started a second business that kind of piggybacks on that and partners with that. That's a DePIN. That's very interesting. A lot of these that we've already discussed started life as a DePIN. They launched their hardware, their software, whatever it is, and then they built off of that. Are we going to see more Deeps? Is it going to be still just like half and half? Like, this seems like a rarer occurrence right now.
Yeah, while a lot of these projects have started as DePIN, a lot of the idea behind their project didn't start as DePIN. Daba, they wanted to build out the Wi-Fi infrastructure, and they saw helium and drew inspiration to go the DePIN route.
Yeah.
You have Ariel, who has been trying to build a map. He tried it with drones first. He tried it in the Web 2 route. And it's been kind of his like brainchild forever, and finally came across DePIN. And so I think, a lot of these founders have wanted to do, this for a long time. Their use cases existed, but DePIN finally kind of gives them the route to make it happen and allow them to scale in ways they couldn't before.
Yeah, certainly there's lots that, were starting something beforehand, but they still didn't have revenue or anything at that point. So I'm curious, are there other examples that you know of, or is it a rarer thing at this moment to have a company that's already existing with existing revenue that then decides we're going to do some DePIN now?
I think we're going to see it in the future. I think we're going to see companies adopt the DePIN model just because maybe to some degree, and maybe not as severe as something that's like, completely changing their business model and going full DePIN. But I could see some companies maybe, offsourcing some workloads to, Aether, to other, different kind of nodes, or maybe just creating their own and incentivizing.
That's a really
other
good
people.
point. Like
Become a hybrid.
utilizing another, crypto company out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I really like that. That's cool. So, okay. So on this topic, like these are some. We discussed a couple of important things that you're seeing right now. What are a couple of the important things that we're not seeing yet? Maybe it's further extension of revenue or something. But what are a couple of things we might see? Maybe it's not this cycle. Maybe it's late or maybe it's next cycle. You see that and you go, DePIN it's going to make it. Like, this is actually happening. We're going to see real world change of whatever that looks like. These are the signals.
I think revenue, like Brad said, is something that is a primary signal, I think. Another one I was going to bring up is, and I think not enough people are talking about it, is DePIN getting a face or a seat at the table when we're talking about regulation with regulators. And I think a very important thing happened recently with Mike Horton, giving his testimony. I think it was either to Congress or it might have been to a Senate committee. I forgot exactly who he was speaking with, but I remember him going to Washington, D.C. and talking about GeoNet, talking about DePIN. And I remember one of the legislators said, "Why haven't I heard about this before?" And it's just like an eye-opening moment of they have no idea what this stuff is still, and they think crypto is this giant speculative like tech scam. When they hear about GeoNet, they're like, "Wait a minute, that's a real use case, and that's like helping people. We should push this technology forward."
This is my reminder. I got to buy more GeoNet. Sorry, Brad or Chris. You have
I
thoughts?
continue to buy GeoNet. Yeah, I think you're right. I think regulatory environment is massive. There's been a lot of Web 2 that's been sidelined. And yeah, Ariel also was in front of the politicians. I mean, one of the things he said was, I guess their feedback was under the prior administration, if we had known about DePIN, maybe we wouldn't have been so hard on the crypto space.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting. So I think getting the word out, I mean, Fortune, again, just highlighted DePIN. They said, hey, crypto has a huge perception issue, but then they use DePIN as like an example of real building taking place. I think, though, from the regulatory side of things, with the stablecoin bill that is expected to pass, you have the infrastructure bill that's expected to come into play, you're going to see a huge amount of new money come into the space. And I think we're going to see a lot more Web 2 traditional financial minds coming into the space. And I think DePIN is going to be something that resonates because you do have real world use case, real world value and revenue that they can start to kind of look at as their other traditional investments. And I think that's been lacking a little bit because, the DGen investors they want to be at the casino, and that's fine. They're in the meme coin space. DePIN is a little bit more of a sophisticated investment, right? And I think that it's going to be really attractive as we get the next wave of investment in.
I'm really glad to hear this because I feel like we have, of course, the major narrative in crypto right now legitimizing all this, which is Bitcoin and just the trajectory that has, the adoption and where that's going, in this current administration and stuff like that. That's finally getting to like a more real place in terms of a global kind of visibility. But I've ever since I first, I've been in DePIN before. It was called DePIN, but once I learned of this, it's called DePIN now. We're all agreeing that it's called this or whatever. It feels like it's the next most legitimate wave of true adoption for crypto, but giving a real serious view to people who previously just wrote crypto off. And I think, and again, it's very funny that we have to discuss revenue the way we are, because it's like, imagine that, a novel concept of these projects.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that people on Wall Street or companies on Wall Street still don't make money, but they still exist, right? So revenue is still a very, it's a novel concept for sure. I think we're going through a renaissance of sorts, though. Oh. We're going through this like rebirth of kind of like the internet did back in the day where the dot-com bubble happened. People are like, oh, that's never going to take off. It's never going to happen.
This will never replace newspapers.
Exactly. This is never replace newspapers. Now you have YouTube having more views than most media outlets.
And single channels having more views. Yeah,
like yours.
not mine included. That's nice. Chris,
there was a period of time in DePIN where it was very standoffish on which chain to actually use, and a lot of them ended up going to Solana. Some died on the hill with Polygon, but they're actually doing very well. I shouldn't say that, but I am actually a really big fan of cross-chain compatibility, and I think if you go into the future of crypto in general, you want to have these wrapped assets and these cross-chain assets because it makes it easier for anyone to invest. When you have a new chain that comes out, a specific one is Cadena, honestly. It's not new, but it's been around for a while. It's very difficult to actually get involved in that token. You can't buy it on a centralized exchange in the United States. You have to go through all these back doors. And Crank was actually able, they're on Cadena. They're actually able to bridge their token now to Solana. They're basically building out all of the code for Cadena. And now it's opened up the door for Cadena, which has, it's like 17 or 18 different chains. In theory, it's like one of the most high-powered chains ever created, and it just doesn't get used.
Some rare positivity about Cadena.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. The other thing, and Demo does a really good job with this, is UI improvements and kind of hiding the blockchain side of things, because it can be very confusing and scary for people to interact with blockchain like we do. Like all of you guys, I know you've been on like Polygon Scan and Fscan.
What's that? I've never heard of that.
You've seen these smart contracts and these transactions, and it's so many letters and characters, and it can get scary for people. And I think the onboarding process with Demo, where they basically, you plug it in the device, you click a button, and it sends a transaction through for you. You can view the transaction if you want, but if you don't know what you're doing, you don't even have to look at it. It makes it seem like more legitimate. Like people will look at it now and they'll say, oh, this is like just another app, like, but it's using blockchain. And I think a lot of companies and projects are going to incorporate blockchain technology. And there's probably plenty of companies that exist today that are using blockchain technology that we use, and we don't even know that it's there because they hide it so well. But blockchain in itself is like, it's so easy to track. It's the perfect like solution to fraud, missing numbers and hiding stuff. Like it's just all very easy to understand for us, but it's also just a good product.
Yeah. As much as I'm sure we all love blockchain and this stuff, I really think you have to hide a lot of it for the obfuscate it a bit for the normal user, which is why I love the Trojan horse of crypto gaming. Like if done well, people will be having assets and various things in their in-game currency stuff all on chain. They just are completely unaware. And congratulations, you just onboarded millions of new crypto users. Okay, so all of DePIN, we agree, we're still early. All of crypto, we're still early. But some DePINs are earlier than other DePINs. So I'm curious where, we can start with you, William, if you want. What are some that are on your radar right now you think are like incredibly early stage that are worth a look? Haven't been around for multiple cycles now. Maybe they're they don't have tokens yet. They're still in test net or whatever, or just early stage stuff that you think is really interesting, fascinating idea. Something has a lot of potential and, someone wants to look into it. Maybe there's some money making opportunities there in the future.
Yeah, there's the one that comes to mind, or I mean two, I guess, because they're working in tandem right now, which is great. But I've talked a lot about a lot of projects. I've talked about Dabo before. I've talked about Silencia. I've talked about just a lot of things I'm bullish on. But something I don't talk about a lot is Tashi and Conduit Network. And I think, Brandon and Ken, you guys are awesome, and I love you guys. You're fantastic builders, fantastic founders. It's funny you mentioned Web3 gaming, though, and that's what kind of got me thinking about Tashi again, is that, Ken is looking to build, or him and his team are looking to build basically the infrastructure for not just Web3 gaming, but gaming in general. Because you have horrible latency issues. You have, there's not, like, gaming, like connectivity and multiplayer games are not as, like, efficient as they could be in the future. And I think that's something that Ken's dearly, he's so passionate about, is wanting to make gaming better. Make multiplayer games more efficient, quicker. And I think building out the infrastructure for that is really important. So I think the way he's going about it with Tashi is very neat. And then Brandon building out a secure cloud compute platform with Conduit. Honestly, if you guys have not listened to Brandon speak before or Ken speak before, you have on Spaces, and they're just the smartest guys in the room all the time. I feel so dumb talking to them.
And what is the ultra high level, ultra truncated version of like how you get involved with either of those? Run a node, run software, run a device? You
would essentially run a node. Yeah. So like with Conduit Network, they sell these specialized nodes, and their whole thing is security, right? And so Brandon is like, hey, we need cloud computing, but you need enterprise level cloud computing where governments and institutions can just easily adopt it into their stack, and it meets all their security needs. And that's what Conduit Network was built. And Tashi is somewhat similar there. You have to you you will be buying a device. You will be, participating in the network in some form or another, running a node, kind of similar to what we've seen in the past. But those will be your entry points. And I think the profitability there is, it has yet to be seen, of course, like those tokens aren't out yet. But I think that just because one, you have this amazing team behind it, and two, the ideas make sense, they fit into the grand scheme of things, that the feasibility is there, which in my mind, feasibility equals revenue equals, number go up, if you will.
I like it. Brad?
I have a few. Let's see. Number one, I would say is, we talked about Daba. I'm wearing this 375 AI.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Very solid project. I'm actually interviewing their CEO on Monday. But they have an in with a media company, so that has billboards all over the country, and they are collecting data. So they have a series of cameras in their hardware, and then they actually have NVIDIA GPUs integrated into that hardware. So they're doing the processing at the edge, and they're basically able to collect all this data all over the country and analyze it at the edge. I think they're going to do really big things. Their CEO. Amazing track record. He was the CEO of Linksys for 2 years. He's on the Forbes 30 under 30. Has had a couple of successful
little company called Linksys.
Yeah, that's no big deal, right? No big deal.
Yeah.
Every router ever for so many years.
Yeah. And they had great growth under him, by the way. So, so a very cool project. Another one's Rover. So I think there's a misconception. There's a lot of people that think they're going head to head with HiveMapper, but they're using, they're building out HD maps. They're using LiDAR. So it's kind of the perfect timing for them. LiDAR technology has gotten way cheaper over the last few years, especially. So the LiDAR sensor they're using like 3 or 4 years ago would have been like $60,000. And now they have it at a price point, I think just under like $2,000. But that's going to be really critical for robotics. And then when you look at autonomous vehicles and being able to actually have not just a two-dimensional map, but a three-dimensional map of different cities. So I think that's another really cool project. And Exhibits is one that is majorly flying under the radar. When you look at decentralized compute networks, you have your Cache, you have your Asana, Render, a lot of
Flux.
Yes, Flux.
Flux is a great project. And Flux is obviously very, very fully decentralized.
Daniel will keep reminding you.
Yes.
Daniel will remind you.
Whether you want him to or not.
We get a reminder on the space every week. But very solid project. Exhibits is doing something quite different where they're actually building out data centers with, 1,000 plus high-end NVIDIA GPUs. They have people they brought in from the Web2 space, that PhDs that have worked in building out these AI data centers, and they know how to, manage the power systems, how to manage the cooling systems, and where a lot of these other decentralized GPU networks can inference, they can't really train sophisticated models, and that's where XBits comes in. So when you look at, Aether and IONET, they're actually sourcing on the high end side, they're sourcing their GPUs through Exhibits. They haven't had their token launch yet, but very solid project.
Very cool. Chris?
I was just
What you got for us?
I was just going to say no one said it, and then he said it the last sentence. But Aether Edge, just got my hands on that. I think that's a really cool idea. And it's another one of those pretty much plug and play. You do have to do a little bit of a stake, but I think the big upside of DePIN in general is that they're very easy to set up, so that you can pretty much follow a YouTube tutorial like putting together IKEA furniture, and it's set up very easily.
And that one is like $1,000-$1,200 for the Aether Edge.
Yes.
And I don't know how long I've been running mine for, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, and it's racked up about $600 in earnings so far. So I'm only a handful of months in. It's 50% of the way to break even. So I think that one's probably a pretty solid one to look at. Sorry, keep going.
No, you're good. And then all you have to do is plug it into, make sure it has an internet connection, make sure it's actually on. There's a single button on the device. It's super easy. The other one is Deep. I like Deep. Projects like Deep, not only just for the project, but the tech that they actually have behind it. Like, I've never owned a computer with a fiber optic port on the back of it. I was like, this is sick. It's very cool.
It's a great mini computer. Yeah.
And they even said, like, in the worst case scenario, if their project goes under, you still have this good enterprise grade hardware that you can then resell. And I like that. I don't like kind of being locked into a project where it's so specific that the hardware can't be used again. And Helium was a great example with all of their Raspberry Pis. You can use those Raspberry Pis for a ton of different things. Crank was actually able to add multi-mining, so you could do Crank and Helium in the beginning. And now I just checked it recently. I was actually blown away. There is like 16 or 24 different projects you can actually you can't dual mine now. It's multi-mining with Crank OS. So you can do like Helium, Crank, Grass. You can like run Grass. We haven't talked about that one. But there's just so many that are really good. Another one, Wingbits. We haven't talked about that, especially with their collaboration with GeoNet. That's like a really cool looking
great device.
Yeah.
I would love to get my hands on one of them if anyone's
Yeah. Expedite, please.
yeah, but it's a really good device, and Brad honestly could probably talk about Wingbits better than I could. But I really like the idea that you can now dual mine with two really good projects that offer real world use case.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Grass. I like Grass. Maybe everybody likes Grass.
Yeah,
like
What
Grass.
kind of grass are we talking about, Andy? I don't.
The digital. Okay, so I want to piggyback off of that question with a follow up that's kind of along the same lines. And if there is overlap, so be it. But you no longer have to stay under the radar. No longer has to be the earliest of the early. But right now, what are the top your top projects in the DePIN space? Could be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever number that you're like top of your list. You're always gonna be like, this is can't be more bullish than these few, and why?
I guess I'll go. I mean, no surprise. I'm going to say DABA Network, of course, like as number one on my list. The clear demand case is there. I could not be more bullish on the team, Karam and Don and them, as well as the idea, the project feasibility and everything. So DABA Network for sure. Something that a lot of people don't talk about, I think, is Alki Labs, or Alki Network, if you will. They're building basically the post mesh for AI and spatial compute, helping robots understand their surroundings, helping AI understand the physical world around them, while also preserving privacy. So I'm super bullish on that idea that I get to keep all my privacy and Google doesn't own all my data, and that my robots can still be as efficient as possible and, help me, do tasks or, take over my life or oppress me in some way in the future when I'm in a prison cube. Well, we'll see. But Alki Network's great. And then, oh my God, the third one. I'm going to keep saying, obviously, I'm going to still be super bullish on Silencio, super bullish on Nadix as well. Those two, I love having my portfolio, not only just because I think their tokens are severely undervalued, but I love participating in those networks too. The software DePINs, I talked with this about you before in our last podcast, but I think that a DePIN on your smartphone, it just makes a lot of sense. A smartphone, like an iPhone, is a great IoT device. It's capable of collecting multiple different data sets and being able to utilize that really seamlessly in these networks by just downloading a simple app is awesome. And so I'm always going to support those because the idea makes sense to me. It's super easy to use. There's barely any friction, and you're contributing to a network that, and honestly, it makes a ton of sense to me. It's, again, super feasible. Revenue's there, demand's there. And so I'm super bullish on all 4 of those.
Yeah, I'm going to generalize here, but software DePINs typically haven't earned as much as their hardware equivalents, but that's okay because I love just how accessible they are. Anyone, whether you're the only access to a computerized device you have, and the internet is like a smartphone. You're in a country where that's the case, like India, like DABA. You still can have access to these things and earn something, which in different countries and different economies might be a really big deal. So I'm a huge fan of those. Brad, what are your top ones?
Number one's GeoNet. It's my top holding. Mike continues to execute. They have the U.S. Department of Agriculture using their network, and they continue to get more coverage. And then you look at where they're going next with robotics. I think there's just so much potential, and they're driving revenue. I think right now they're around $250,000 a month in revenue. I think that team continues to impress. Number 2, DABA. Look, the amount of usage they're seeing on the network already is pretty ridiculous. They're 1.4 billion people in their population, only 5% have access to broadband. And with the laser technology they're about to start implementing to build out the infrastructure, they're going to be the only game in town in those regions. And then looking further into the future, other emerging markets they're going to be able to replicate those efforts in. So I think the size of the total addressable market is so massive for DABA. And then, look, I'm a huge fan of the decentralized compute space. I think, as we see AI take this next leap forward with AI agents, AGI coming, I think inferencing is going to have so much demand. And I think a lot of these networks are going to do well. And, I brought it up already, but Exabits is the one that I think is doing something different than all the rest, in the sense that they're truly building out these large AI data centers. They're tokenizing the compute. And I think getting exposure to them is going to basically get you exposure to a lot of the other decentralized GPU platforms that are sourcing compute from them.
Yeah, that one is super. I've heard of them. I'm just not super familiar, but it's a very different take on the decentralized. I mean, it's definitely a more, in some ways, centralized model of decentralized compute. But it's a very interesting way to build that.
Certainly. Yeah,
Chris?
it's a hybrid, I would say.
Yeah, I like that.
All
What
right.
about you, Chris?
I'll tell one or two, not in a particular order.
Don't mention a vape to earn one, please.
And then I'll be the Debbie.
Vape to earn is my number one holding.
I'll be the Debbie Downer of the group after this. But I'm a big fan of Demo, HiveMapper, GeoNet. Like they've been around for a while. And Helium's a good one too. I mean, honestly, they had the $50 token and now they're only $4. So the thing that I try to do now, and the mistake I made in the beginning when I got into Helium, was that I kind of put all my eggs into one basket. And I try not to be now, in my wise years, super bullish on one project in particular and kind of advertise it, because I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket again. But it's nice because in the DePIN space and in the crypto space in general, there's a ton of different projects that are doing a ton of different things. And like the fact that HiveMapper and GeoNet have no overlap, to me is nice, because, okay, like completely different market segments. If something were to happen to the GeoNet side of things, I would still be okay with the HiveMapper side of things. So that's kind of the way I look at it now. It's tough for me to pick the best project, because I could say it now on this podcast, and a month from now, something terrible could happen, so it is difficult.
There's also a lot of choices too,
yes,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Also, so many. We could stay here all night talking about all these, deep.
And
projects.
we will. Welcome.
Welcome to the DePIN lair.
Get comfortable.
DePIN den.
So I will echo that. Like in the traditional finance world, diversification is a great way to get rich incredibly slowly. Like in the traditional finance world, you need to do some concentration to have big swings and big movements in the portfolio. In the crypto space, I think is a little bit the opposite, where not super diversified, but some smart diversification is requirement, because in a way, we're all like venture capitalists in that we're going to be investing in a smattering of projects and companies across the board, and it's fully expected. I mean, anybody who've been here for multiple cycles know a lot of these will not make it through the cycle, or at least through the next cycle. They will not survive a bear market. It's just the reality. So you better prepare yourself and, have some backup plans, and be very smart about what can hurt you and take you down. So I go over my quick tops. I got to mention Tempe. Love myself some Tempe. Wish more people would be talking about Tempe. $2 million market cap. Teeny tiny Tempe. Of course, DABA. We've already covered plenty of reasons why DABA is very, very bullish on that. Deep. Love what Deep is doing. And then I'll echo the GeoNet. Love GeoNet. Real revenue. I mean, $700 device, or if you buy the WingBits one, a bit more than that, but $700 device. Still making $100 to $200 a month, like clockwork. I mean, just that return is an amazing opportunity. And then you get into all the fundamentals of the project. Okay, so let's close out here. We've gone through some of the under the radar ones. We've gone through some of our tops. I just want to get one quick kind of ending take from everybody. To those who are listening, who maybe have some exposure, maybe no exposure, or don't quite know how to navigate this deep in space, where we're at in the cycle right now, what is your big call to action? What's your big takeaway? What's your big like wake up moment that you want to leave people with to look at the rest of this year or maybe 2026?
I guess I'll start. First off, make sure you're following Andy's channel. That's a huge wake up call.
And everybody
and
else.
everybody. I was going to mention us too. If you, I mean, that's one thing is always arm yourself with as much information as possible, right? Always research. We all pride ourselves on, gathering all that research, gathering all this information and relaying that information to people in as honest a manner as possible. So I think that's huge. Obviously, do your own research, do lots of reading, lots of video watching, lots of podcasts like this one. But yeah, I mean, besides that, just look into trying DePINs out. I mean, just look into, again, we talked about software DePINs, download a Grass node, download a Dawn internet node, download a Gradient node on your internet browser, or download exactly for free. Download Silencio, download Nadix, download 375 AI. There's so many different options for you to get involved and not even have to allocate any capital to. But if you're looking to allocate capital, I mean, don't buy like a ton of nodes expecting to be able to set them all up. Of course, maybe start off with one Helium hotspot, install it in a friend's restaurant or near your mom's kitchen. Maybe, who knows? It might work out there if they get a lot of business. But it's just those like simple acts of diversification, like we talked about, can go a long way. Just starting off small and then working your way up is the way I recommend. Just because I'm a hyper conservative investor, I get really spooked out by high levels of risk in my portfolio. So that's how I started in DePIN, and it's slowly becoming a more major part of my portfolio. But I started off very small, and it worked out. So I think that's my key kind of send off here.
Yeah, I think baby steps, because crypto is incredibly overwhelming, is a very very wise course of action.
Yeah.
Chris?
I'll keep it short and sweet. It's going to be one sentence. Are you ready? Okay.
I'm not prepared.
Keep your eyes open and don't FOMO into one project. That's it.
Can you just
And
like
now,
drop the
I guess
mic?
I should elaborate. Yeah, like obviously don't just throw all your eggs in one basket. So I was just saying like 30 seconds earlier, and keep your eyes open in the fact that you got to be on alert with a lot of these projects, because sometimes they can do some shady stuff, and you got to call them out on it and hold them responsible, because some of these companies, they can they can walk away with your money. So you just got to always be on your toes and be alert, and just pay attention. That's all I got.
Good stuff. Brad, take us home.
I would say get your feet wet in the space. DePIN, I think, is a very exciting sector. It's, we're seeing real businesses really being built and real revenue. I think it has a chance to change that perception issue, if you will, in the crypto space. But do your due diligence. Follow. There's a lot of great accounts. William's great. He hosts a lot of spaces. Obviously, Andy's amazing. Yeah, Chris over here, he has a great website that he just revamped. So a great resource there. I have my own YouTube channel as well. So there's plenty of opportunity, plenty of great resources. But I would say, to your point, if you're going to do a deployment business, it is a good idea to start small. For one, there are some growing pains with some of these things. There's some things that you have to work out as far as getting your payment systems worked out and figuring out the best way to optimize your setups, and then scale from there. But I would say the biggest thing is getting started. Don't stay on the sidelines, y'all. And there are ways to do it without having to invest money. You can do it for free with these apps. But that'd be my statement.
I love it. And maybe that, the whole deployment thing, maybe that warrants another episode in the future, a deep dive. So if that's of interest and there's interest to talk about it, let me know down in the comments. And then too, yeah, come on, there's zero excuse for people who, if you're watching this, especially with all of the opportunities that are out there, to not be getting your feet wet, to not be jumping in and doing something, because a little, a few minutes of your time here and there per week could end up being some pretty big profits if everything goes well. But whatever you do, thank you for watching this episode of the Andy and Friends podcast. I got my friends here, and this is the podcast. That's how it works. As per usual, I will link down below to all their channels, all their social, anything we talked about, all that good stuff. I very much appreciate you all watching, and I appreciate you all joining me today.
We appreciate you, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
I will see y'all next time.